After 60 years of teaching, praying, and living side by side, 3 aging nuns were told to leave the only home they have ever known. But instead of fading quietly into a retirement home, they found the courage and the community to fight for their dignity. Was it an escape, a protest, or simply a desperate bid for dignity in old age? Today we'll uncover the extraordinary true story of the Austrian nuns who broke back into their own covenant and into the headlines around the world. Welcome to That's Life, I Swear. This podcast is about life's happenings in this world that conjure up such words as intriguing, frightening, life-changing, inspiring, and more. I'm Rick Barron, your host. That said, here's the rest of this story. In the rolling hills of Salzburg, where Mozart once composed music, a recent event occurred that was so extraordinary, it left church officials scratching their heads. What was that story? Our story concerns 3 remarkable women of the cloth who, having dedicated their lives to serving the Almighty, found themselves engaged in what could only be described as the holiest heist since the Crusades. Sister Rita, Sister Regina, and Sister Bernadette, names they wear with the dignity of battle-tested generals, had spent decades in peaceful contemplation at Goldenstein Castle Abbey. But peace, as any seasoned clerk will tell you, is often the prelude to the most divine of disturbances. At this moment, the hands of these nuns were trembling slightly, not from age alone, but from something else entirely. Defiance, hope, the quiet courage it takes to say simply, "This is where I belong." They watched their community shrink over the decades. One by one, sisters passed away, or they just transferred elsewhere. The trio adapted, their bond deepening as their numbers began to dwindle. They became more than housemates. They became each other's family, finding completeness in their trinity. And then came the letter that would change everything. The trouble began with a change in management. Enter one Marcus Grazel, an abbot armed with canon law and what he undoubtedly considered the best of intentions. The letter quickly cut to the chase. Canon law was clear. Religious communities needed at least 6 members to remain viable. 3 were simply not enough, no matter how devoted those 3 might be. The abbey, beautiful as it was, had become impractical. The retirement facility Marcus had chosen offered modern amenities, regular meals, medical care nearby. On paper, it made perfect sense. But a home is something you can't calculate on paper. The sisters who had been living quite contently as a trinity found this logic less than compelling. Sister Bernadette, at 88, and possessed the kind of spiritual fortitude that comes from decades of dealing with unruly students, was particularly unimpressed. She had joined the Abbey in 1955 when it housed 35 nuns and watched their numbers dwindle with this philosophical acceptance of someone who understands that all earthly things are temporary, except apparently one's attachment to one's home. The retirement facility to which they were located was by all accounts perfectly adequate. It featured modern amenities, regular meals, and the company of retired male clergy. This detail must have felt rather like being transferred from a contemplative monastery to a boarding house. Now the sisters adapted with the expected grace of their calling, which is to say they smiled politely, but they were plotting their return. They weren't going to stay. Sister Regina, once a mathematics teacher, calculated the odds of escape. Sister Rita, the gardener among them, probably dreamed of her own greenhouse while staring at the institutional walls. And Sister Bernadette, former home economics instructor and disciplinarian extraordinaire, undoubtedly began formulating a plan with the precision she once applied to lesson planning. Now, every great escape requires a network of conspirators, and Providence provided these nuns with perhaps the most motivated accomplices imaginable, their former students. At a class reunion, former students quickly cut to the conversation to deal with their beloved teacher's misfortune. Former student Christina Wardenberger, now 65 and apparently possessing both a driver's license and a rebellious streak that would have made her teachers proud, emerged as the mastermind. Now one imagines her addressing the gathering with the same authority she might have once used to organize a school bake sale. Ladies and gentlemen, our sisters are in distress. Something must be done, and it will be done. The plan they hatched was breathtaking in its audacity. They would stage what amounted to a kidnapping, except the victims were willing participants, and the crime scene was a medieval abbey. A WhatsApp group was established, surely the first time in history that instant messaging had been used to coordinate a liberation of the nuns, and some 200 supporters rallied to the cause with the enthusiasm of a digital age children's crusade. The beauty of this scheme lay in its transparency. Rather than sneaking out in the dead of night like common criminals, they invited the press. This was to be a public relations coup, disguised as a rescue mission, a media event with divine sanction. After all, what authority would dare oppose 3 elderly nuns, surrounded by reporters, and armed with nothing more than their dangerous rosary beads and righteous indignation? It was around 2 p.m. on September the 4th. One suspects for maximum dramatic effect. The operation commenced. Now picture a black Opel sedan pulling up to the retirement home, followed by a white moving truck and a convoy of journalists who had clearly never covered a story quite like this one. Sister Regina and Sister Rita, who had apparently been spreading word of the escape plan, emerged from the facility with the dignity of queens departing for coronation. The third member of their group, Sister Bernadette, quickly joined the group. The drive to Goldenstein Castle must have felt like the most righteous road trip in Austrian history. 15 minutes through familiar countryside, past landmarks that held decades of memories, toward a building that housed not just their belongings, but their very souls. The convoy arrived to find the abbey dark and empty, with utilities disconnected and stair lifts removed, looking instead like a medieval castle after an extensive siege. But here our heroines demonstrated the kind of practical faith that has sustained religious orders through centuries of adversity. A locksmith had been arranged, surely for the first in history to be called for a holy break-in and entering, and the sisters climbed 4 flights of stairs to their former rooms with the determination of pilgrims ascending to the shrine. It wasn't long before the police arrived, called by the officials reporting 3 missing nuns. Now, when the police arrived, they were faced with a scene they were not expecting. Before them were 3 nuns, sitting calmly at the kitchen table, surrounded by their supporters. Now, one has to ask, how do you arrest 3 elderly religious women who insist they haven't broken into anywhere, but have simply come home? Oddly enough, one of the responding officers happened to be a former student who greeted the sisters with hugs rather than handcuffs. Within days of their return, the abbey was transformed from an empty castle to a bustling headquarters of what could only be described as a grassroots campaign. The WhatsApp group, which had grown to 200 members, were more eager than the last to assist in what they surely saw as a sacred cause. Electricity was restored, new appliances appeared, and security cameras were installed with the efficiency of a Vatican renovation project. Now the media attention grew exponentially. The BBC picked up the story and CNN quickly followed suit. Reporters from across Europe descended upon Salzburg quickly. A German journalist set up an inflatable mattress in the abbey, preparing to cover the story with the dedication of a war correspondent. An Instagram account quickly appeared, documenting the nuns' daily lives with a count of followers that would quickly make influencers weep with envy. Through it all, our 3 sisters maintained the composure of seasoned celebrities. They held court at their antique wooden table, unfolding their white tablecloth with the practiced precision of the daily ritual. Sister Regina, the mathematician turned internet sensation, would often doze peacefully during interviews. Sister Bernadette, the former disciplinarian, who had once struck fear into students' hearts, displayed a sweetness that suggested enlightenment, or perhaps simply the satisfaction of a plan well executed. As the weeks passed, the situation evolved into something resembling a medieval standoff, complete with castle, siege conditions, and two sides claiming divine authority. Church officials found themselves in a very unprecedented position, dealing with rebel nuns who dared to be both elderly and sympathetic. How does one discipline three women whose only crime was wanting to die in the place they had served God for decades? The abbot's spokesman, Harold Shuffle, found himself attempting to explain why the church had relocated three elderly nuns from their beloved home to what critics characterize as exile. His position, while correct, suffered from public relations disadvantage by making the church look like bullies against three little nuns. It was perhaps the most challenging theological communications crisis since Galileo suggested that the earth might not be the center of the universe. Now, our story ends with the sisters remaining in their beloved abbey, surrounded by supporters, blessed by media attention, and presumably enjoying the most excitement they've ever experienced since their teaching days. The story has become something larger than a simple dispute over housing arrangements. It has evolved into a meditation on home, belonging, and the right for the old to choose their own path toward eternity. Now, the Vatican, in its infinite wisdom, has maintained a diplomatic silence that suggests that this crisis requires more prayer than policy. Now, church officials find themselves caught between church law and public opinion, between practical considerations and the romantic appeal of three little nuns who just wanted to go home. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this entire affair is how it captured the imaginations of people far beyond Austria's borders. In an age of global conflicts and crisis, the world paused to follow the adventures of these three nuns who staged what might be history's most polite revolution. Their rebellion asked fundamental questions about authority and the meaning of sanctuary that resonate far beyond church law. The sisters themselves seem largely untroubled by the implications of their actions. They have returned to their prayers, their routines, and their greenhouse dreams with the contentment of those who have fought the good fight and found themselves victorious. Now, whether this victory will be permanent remains a matter for the church lawyers, Vatican officials, and perhaps divine intervention to determine. But for now, in a medieval castle outside Salzburg, these three nuns sit at their antique table, unfold their white tablecloth with practiced precision, and demonstrate that sometimes the most profound acts of faith involve the simple courage to insist on going home. No matter what anyone says, no matter what the rules might be, sometimes you know where you belong. Now, what can we learn from the story? What's the takeaway? At its heart, this is a story about universal need for home, dignity, and agency in the face of aging and institutional change. It's also about how collective memory and community can give people strength when larger systems fail them. Home is more than a building. It's memory, identity, and belonging. For the sisters, the Abbey wasn't just walls and halls. It was the rhythm of their lives, their community, and their legacy. Well, there you go, my friends. That's life, I swear. For further information regarding the material covered in this episode, I invite you to visit my website, which can be found on Apple Podcasts, for show notes and the episode transcript. As always, I thank you for the privilege of you listening and your interest. Be sure to subscribe here or wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. And we'll see you soon.